أهلا بكم. مريم فرانسوا كاتبة وصحفية وأكاديمية من أصول أيرلندية وفرنسية. ولدت في لندن وعاشت فيها طوال حياتها. عاشت في القدس بعد إسلامها عام 2003 لعدة أشهر، ثم بدأت في تعلم اللغة العربية. مريم تحمل صوتا جريئا في الدفاع عن القضايا العادلة، وعلى رأسها القضية الفلسطينية، ولها العديد من البرامج منها The Tea with مريم فرانسوا تسلط الضوء على الروايات المهمشة وتفكك السرديات الإعلامية التقليدية حول الشرق الأوسط لتقدم رؤية نقدية تتحدى السائد. مواقفها الداعمة لغزة والحق الفلسطيني جعلتها من الأصوات البارزة في المشهد الإعلامي، إذ تجمع بين التحليل العميق والشجاعة في الطرح. تنضم إلينا من لندن الإعلامية البريطانية الدكتورة مريم فرانسوا. أهلا بك دكتورة مريم، وأنا بعرف أنك إلى حد ما تتحدثين العربية، لكن للتسهيل عليك يعني تتحدثين في اللغة الإنجليزية. بداية بدي أسألك، لماذا اخترت الاسم مريم بدلا من اسمك الحقيقي إيميلي؟
Oh, that's a big one. You want to go all the way back to that? Well, when I became Muslim in my teen years, I wanted to make sure that I had a name that carried the inspiration of someone that I admired greatly from our tradition as Muslims. And for me, the figure of Maryam alayha salam is obviously a figure that I identify with and look up to and respect immensely. And of course, in our tradition as Muslims, you name children according to a figure whose qualities we hope that they might embody. So, I can't claim that, but that certainly was the idea behind it.
طبعا الكثير من المعلومات عنك هذا أتركه للذي يريد أن يعرف عنك أكثر من خلال البحث على جوجل. نأتي مباشرة إلى القضايا العميقة والمهمة التي تناضلين من أجلها. مريم فرانسوا أيرلندية فرنسية تعيش في الغرب، عاشت تجربة التمثيل، لكن أخذت من القضية الفلسطينية يعني جوهرا وقضية تناضل من أجلها. ما الذي جعل مريم تكرس وقتها لخدمة قضية تعد من أهم القضايا العادلة في العالم؟
Well, I don't know if I picked the Palestinian cause or the Palestinian cause picked me, actually. Probably more to the point, when I was around 19, I moved to Jerusalem. I was working in the West Bank, and I spent just under a year living and working with Palestinians who took me in literally as family. I was out there on my own. I was very young, and really I graduated really when I left Palestine from the University of Palestine, is probably the best way to put it. I had lived under the occupation. I had witnessed the violence of everyday life for Palestinians under Israeli control. And really, it was something that became part of me, and something that I felt that I couldn't ignore after I left. And of course, that's true at the level of just being a human. I don't know anyone who has visited the occupied territories and not returned with a sense of deep responsibility to carry forward the injustices that they witness on the ground. But there's also obviously a secondary level to that for me personally, in that, as a Muslim, I care deeply about the Palestinian issue, about our first Qibla, Jerusalem, and about the wider issues affecting our Ummah. So these were all part of the reason why the Palestinian issue for me is one that will forever be in my heart. But most of all, of course, is the responsibility I carry for the people I left behind, whose voices aren't being heard and whose experiences are not being seen, and to whom I owe everything.
أنا أعرف على الصعيد الشخصي عدد من الغربيين، خاصة خلال دراستي في جامعة بيرزيت في رام الله، كانوا مناصرين جدا لإسرائيل في اللحظة التي قدموا فيها إلى الضفة الغربية وعايشوا الاحتلال والقمع الإسرائيلي، غيروا مواقفهم وأصبحوا سفراء لفلسطين في دولهم. يعني أستطيع القول أنه معايشتك للتجربة الفلسطينية تحت الاحتلال أسهمت كثيرا في جعلك تؤمنين جدا بعدالة هذه القضية.
Well, I already grew up believing in the rights of all occupied people to be liberated because, as you mentioned in your introduction, I am half Irish, and the Irish people continue to live under British occupation in the north of Ireland. And the Palestinian issue and the Irish liberation issue have always coexisted side by side. I think our movements have always drawn on each other and inspired one another and supported one another. So I did not enter the occupied territories without a sort of pre-existing understanding of the conflict and the occupation. But as a Muslim who at the time was wearing hijab and was visibly Muslim, and whom everybody, whether it was Palestinian or Israeli, just assumed was Palestinian when I lived there, I very much had a first-hand experience of the occupation day to day, including the violence of the occupation. When I was there, our bus, I was playing for a basketball team in Jerusalem. Our bus was derailed by a settler. Many of us were seriously injured. The experiences of violence day to day were not things that you can easily forget.
وأنا يعني أنت بتحملين الكثير من القصص صراحة، منها مثلا لما كانوا في فلسطين يفكروك فلسطينية ولكن ليه ما بتحكي عربي. بس بكل الأحوال يعني ربما أنا بدي أتطرق إلى موضوع ذكرتيه في قصة يعني حادث السير اللي تعرضتوا له، وهناك اكتشفتي يعني حتى في المستشفيات الإسرائيلية نظام الفصل العنصري ضد المرضى. إذا بالإمكان هيك تعطينا ولو بإيجاز ما حصل، تخبرينا.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Well, firstly, I would say that just to come back on your point about me not speaking Arabic, I speak very poor Arabic. But what I would regularly get told, even by Palestinians, was, Aib alayki, how did your family? This is what happens to Palestinians when they go abroad. They forget to teach their children to speak Arabic. This is shameful. You have to know your language. You have to know your culture. And I would say to them, no, عندي جواز سفر Francia, and they would say, no. Even if you have a French passport, you will always be a Palestinian. So I understood very quickly a lot of things about Palestine through my experience there. And I also understood that when I went through a checkpoint as somebody wearing hijab, even if I showed a French passport, the Israelis would regularly say things to me like, just because a dog is born in a barn doesn't make it a cow. In other words, just because a Palestinian acquires a passport from a European nation, it doesn't make them a European. So I could see, many evidences of the type of racism and discrimination and violence, verbal and physical. If you live in the occupied territories, it's a normal thing to have guns pointed in your face, in your children's face, in your parents' face, to experience brutality and there to be no accountability. And of course, you mentioned the accident that I was involved in. Of course, when we had this accident and there were many injured people, most of the people in our bus were people who had Palestinian IDs. Some of them had Jerusalem IDs, meaning they carried the Israeli passport. And they, when the ambulances came, they refused to take us before they could check that we had Israeli IDs, or in my case, a foreign passport. So, we left behind people who were waiting to be taken by an ambulance that was going to be able to take them to a hospital within the West Bank. So yes, the segregation that we talk about is very real, even at the hospital. The treatment that we receive, the attitudes that we receive, it was very clear that we were not welcome in those spaces. And, if a hospital is somewhere that you usually go to feel like you will get treatment and care, this was somewhere where we felt intensely policed, and not at all at ease with regards to our safety and security. It was a mirror. The hospital was a mirror of the wider apartheid of the society that is Israel today.
طب دكتورة مريم، يعني أنت تظهرين كثيرا في الإعلام الغربي، لمستي بأنه الإعلاميين اللي بيشتغلوا يعني سواء في البرامج أو في الأخبار هم فعلا يجهلون الحقيقة أم يعلمون الحقيقة والحقيقة وليس غير الحقيقة بخصوص فلسطين، لكنهم ينفذون أجندة المحطات التي يعملون فيها في الغرب؟
I mean, all TV agendas, all TV stations have agendas, right? And I think it's important to recognize that most stations have an editorial line when it comes to any given issue, which you're expected to hold to as, a presenter or a journalist on that network. And clearly, there is a perception that Israel is a Western ally, and therefore that because of course on top of it, the reality is that many Israelis are also Westerners. Of course they have created this fantasy of some sort of connection to the Holy Land, but let's be honest, most of them are Eastern European, American. I mean, when I lived in Jerusalem, the most common accents I would hear in the streets were Brooklyn and Russian. So, we're literally talking about people, who have connections usually to Western countries, or because they are Westerners, actually. And so in many cases, I think what we're talking about is the ease with which people find it simpler to make connections between themselves and people they think are like them. And of course, we're living in a society where Islamophobia has created a profound othering of Muslims and of Muslim peoples, to the extent that even though the Palestinians are not all Muslims, of course, there's a large community of Christians, and of course, there are also people of no religion and other religions. The reality is that everybody gets tarred with the same Islamophobic brush. As Muslims, we will not be giving up on the Palestinian issue, regardless of any deals that they might be making. And I think it's high time for us as an ummah to wake up to the reality of the power that we represent, and start pushing for liberation, starting with the Palestinian people and spreading out from there.
طب هذا الإعلام في الغرب، وأنا يعني آسف إني عم بركز على الإعلام في الغرب ربما بسبب يعني ما ألحقه من ظلم وأذى للفلسطينيين، لا يتمتع حقيقة بحرية التعبير ولا بالإنصاف ولا بالحيادية. يعني دائما يحاول ولو أعطى مساحة قليلة للفلسطينيين وصوتهم، الصوت الأكبر هو لمن يناصر يعني إسرائيل. وأنت لك تجربة مثلا مع الإعلامي اللي أصبح سيء السمعة في العالم العربي ولدى أحرار العالم، بيرس مورغان. قل أدبه معك لدرجة أنه قال لك إما أن تجيبي عن سؤالي أو تغلقي فمك. يعني كيف شعرتي بهذه الإساءة حينها؟ كيف بتردي على من يسمي نفسه مذيع ويتطاول بهذه الطريقة السمجة يعني الوقحة؟
So with all due respect, in both my private life and my professional life, there is no man that speaks to me like that. And so that is where the conversation ends. The minute you extend a disrespect to me, there is no more conversation to be had. I think, if anything, the last few months have revealed Piers Morgan to be somebody who has provided ideological cover for genocide. And just as we saw in previous genocides, whether that was the Nuremberg trials, where members of the press were put on trial for the role that they played in providing, some form of support for the genocide, or in Rwanda, where we also saw members of the press put on trial for supporting genocide. I think we have to regard people like Piers Morgan and many others as having participated to a climate that not only helped provide cover for the genocide, but actually encouraged it. And that is frankly a crime against humanity. So far beyond any disrespect he posed to me, I think that's almost irrelevant. The most significant issue with him, his program, and others like him is the cover that they have provided to war crimes, to babies being left to die in incubators, to health workers being lined up and murdered and buried in mass graves, to Palestinians being tortured, to children being sniped in the head. Let's not lose focus of what really is at stake here, and any verbal disrespect to me is nothing compared to the reality of what his show has legitimated in the eyes of so many.
طيب، طبعا احنا دائما معك ونثمن جدا مواقفك. شو اللي بيخلي الشعوب الأوروبية متفاوتة في معرفتها للقضية الفلسطينية ومناصرتها؟ في النرويج أكثر متقدمين في مناصرتهم للفلسطينيين مثلا من الدنمارك، في إسبانيا أكثر مثلا من ألمانيا. شو سبب هذا التفاوت في هذه الدول الأوروبية؟
Well, Germany is a very good question because, of course, Germany having, been primarily responsible for the genocide against the Jews, the Roma, gays, and various other peoples, millions of people during the Second World War, has, up until probably the last year or so, presented itself as having done the work necessary to deal with that history. And so we would expect that the conclusion of having participated in a previous genocide that is considered one of the greatest horrors in European history would be never again. Sadly, what we have learned from Germany today is that what never again seems to mean to them is never again to Jewish people, not never again to anyone. And so I think really the challenge for Germany and for European countries more broadly is linked to the question of what we mean when we are held accountable for the crimes of our past, and when we say that we are atoning for them, because clearly Germany has significantly lost its way on this issue and has somehow turned, the responsibility for making right the wrongs of its actions during the Second World War, support for more wrong actions in the current era. Now, the histories are different to, of course, somewhere like Spain, but I think you're also talking about, countries that have also different economic ties, maybe to Israel, different relationships to the Israeli government, and certainly that would play a big part in the decisions that they make about the political position they take with regards to the ongoing Palestinian liberation movement. If you go to Northern Ireland today, you will see Catholic neighborhoods, Catholics representing the Irish from Ayr, which is Free Ireland. Side by side with the Irish flag, you will find the Palestinian flag, and then you will find the British flag side by side with the Israeli flag. So that tells you everything you need to know about really the dynamics in the north of Ireland and the ways in which it parallels the occupation, of course, that is happening in Palestine, albeit that I would say that obviously today the ongoing occupation is now more than occupation. It has catapulted into, genocide, ongoing ethnic cleansing. We're seeing, news of over 40,000 people in the West Bank being displaced and being told that they will not be allowed to return to their lands. We are seeing, a very, very critical stage in the ongoing ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. And I think anyone who has lived through occupation or colonialism tends to recognize it quite clearly. And those, unfortunately, who've tended to live in the centers of empire but have always identified with the colonizers tend to not be able to always see that so clearly. Having said that, it's important to say that public opinion, both here in the UK, in the US, and across many parts of Europe, has changed significantly over the last year and a bit. We have seen public opinion today being massively in favor of, Palestinian statehood. We've seen many European states actually recognizing a Palestinian state. And we are seeing, cases being brought against senior Western leaders and Israeli leaders by some Western governments. So I think it's important to recognize that even here, that the people often do see through many of the legacy media stories that are meant to, incline us towards regarding the Israelis as the victims of the situation, which couldn't be a more absurd description, but sadly is a reality. Thanks to social media, many people today are seeing what's actually happening on the ground, and their understanding of what's happening in Palestine is much clearer. The question is much more so for all of us today, whether we're in the Arab world or the Western world, what we choose to do about it.
هل تعانين على شبكات التواصل الخاصة بك من التضييق على المحتوى الفلسطيني؟ يعني أنا شخصيا ضحية من هذه الضحايا لهذا التضييق.
Yeah, I mean, look, we know shadow banning is a real thing. And unfortunately, a lot of the platforms are censoring Palestinian content. We know that today, for example, on TikTok, you cannot use the hashtag Free Palestine anymore. If you post anything actually on Palestine on TikTok, you are immediately shadow banned. Our account is currently going through exactly this. And I think, look, the only lesson we can really take from this is the recognition that we will not find liberation on platforms created by people who have no interest in our liberation. We need alternative platforms. We need investment in different tech spaces so that we can see, alternative areas that we can platform our ideas with the freedoms necessary to share ideas, thoughts, visions of the world, alternative interpretations of both history and current facts. And I think that is, a lesson that has to be taken from this current juncture, is that we need to invest in tech spaces, our own tech spaces.
يعني الوقت بده ينتهي وأنا كثير مبسوط في الحديث معك، بس بعجالة ربما دقيقتين أو ثلاث. سؤال إجابته نقدية. هل تعترفي أو تقرين مثلا أو لك رأي بأن الفلسطينيين قدموا قضيتهم وروايتهم للغرب على النحو المطلوب أم مقصرون في ذلك؟
That's a difficult question, because I don't know that Palestinians have been given the platforms necessary to even really express their point of view. I mean, I look at someone like Noura Erakat, who is an incredible, Palestinian American lawyer who is very rarely actually given the mic and is an incredibly eloquent speaker. We have, Hassam Zumna here in the UK, who's the Palestinian ambassador, who is also an incredibly strong speaker. Again, very rarely given the mic in mainstream media to really talk. And often those interviews with him seem to be more car crash than anything else. So I think maybe the bigger question for Palestinians is a question of leadership. And I'm not teaching the Palestinians anything when I say that. I'm simply reflecting, a clear sense of frustration that I'm aware of among Palestinians, that where exactly has the Palestinian leadership been over the last 16 months? Why is it that the PA is arresting people trying to resist the occupation? Why is it that we are not seeing the top tier of the Palestinian leadership come out of Ramallah and actually speak out against current events? It's perplexing for many people, not least, of course, Palestinians, but also for the rest of us. And I think the main issue for Palestinians is one of leadership, of a coherent, centralized leadership that can provide direction and a voice for negotiations over what the terms of that liberation are now going to look like.
طيب، بدقيقة ونصف، سؤال له دقيقة وسؤال ثاني نصف دقيقة. الكثير يطمح في أن يصل إلى هوليوود والتمثيل. تركت التمثيل ولجأت إلى الإعلام وإلى الإخراج والوثائقيات. شو السبب؟
Well, I don't know if I can answer that in a minute, but the brief answer is that I'm not very big on people telling me what to say. I'm much bigger on writing my own lines and my own content. So perhaps you can read between the lines on that one where my preference is when it comes to reciting other people's garbage, or having the opportunity to actually forge ideas that are grounded in my own research and background. So I'd much prefer to tell my own stories.
أخيرا، وفي اللغة العربية، وأنت عم تلبس الآن شيء له علاقة التقليدية الفلسطينية، الزي التقليدي، كلمات باللغة العربية توجهينها إلى الشعب الفلسطيني؟
Sure. I mean, my Arabic is really rusty these days, but سأستطيع أن أتكلم معكم بهذه اللغة. تحرير الفلسطينيين هي قضية أهم قضية للمسلمين وللعالم العربي. فيه أساس التحرير كلنا، وممكن أن نقول إنه غير ممكن على معظمنا أن نسيت هذه القضية. هي سيكون مهم لكلنا يعني أبدا أبدا you know.
شكرا. شكرا من لندن الإعلامية البريطانية دكتورة مريم فرانسوا، وشكرا لكم مشاهدينا على المتابعة.